about remote context mapping and prototyping during lockdown. So Wies, please.
Yes. Okay. Thanks for having me here. And I'm going to tell something more about our paper, Remote Context Mapping and Prototyping During Lockdown, a study case. I wrote this together with Froukje Sleeswijk Visser. She's an assistant professor service design at the Faculty of Industrial Design Engineering in Delft, at the TU Delft. And together with Jeroen van Erp, he's a professor of concept design, also at the Faculty of Industrial Design Engineering in Delft. And I'm Wies van Nifterik. I'm a full-time design researcher at Zeewaardig Service Design. It's a design agency in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And I'm mostly focusing on social design issues. And I graduated in September 2020 at the Master Design for Interaction at the Faculty of Industrial Design Engineering. And my graduation project was the case study we used for this paper. So the case study was a co-design project which ran from the first moment of the first COVID-19 lockdown in the Netherlands. And through a reflection on the applied methods of involving users remotely in this project, lessons were learned for remote co-design in general. And in this presentation, I first want to show a bit more of the case study by using parts of a documentary I made of this co-design project. And in the end of the presentation, I show the 3 principles we defined to guide remote context mapping in general. So the case study, let's go back in time to the start of the Dutch lockdown on March 11, 2020. So everyone had to reinvent life during this period, and that especially in households with children created friction, arguments, irritations, but maybe it also brought new opportunities and new ways of living and lessons we could take with us. So the focus of this co-design project was on defining the positive lessons learned during the forced isolation within Dutch families. And after this, defining these lessons, how could families take these lessons with them into their lives after the crisis? And what can we design for that? So to answer that question, I started a co-design project with 5 different families during the pandemic in the Netherlands. And this was from March to September 2020. So co-design, it involves people in the design process. So this is normally executed within the physical environment of the user group to get a clear image of the everyday life and needs from the user's perspective. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the restrictions hindered user involvement within the user's context. So how could we execute a co-design project in a remote way? So I first want to show a short part of the documentary I made of this co-design project. And I used context mapping in a remote way. And 1 week prior, so really in the beginning of this research, the different families received a package with sensitized booklets and a selfie stick and all kind of assignments to kind of in a playful way capture fragments of their daily lives in the first beginning of the lockdown. So I'm going to show a short part, and all the material you see is made by the families themselves.
Kijk, elke ochtend eten we gezellig met z'n allen. Hè? Ook door de week als we moeten werken.
Dat kan nog niet.
Je doet het. Ik heb de afstandsbedieningen. Snap hem.
Wat de gezinnen hebben ervaren is dat de ritmes en routines binnen het gezin heel synchroon liepen.
Nu was en thuis.
Het pad staat 7-2, de trein half.
Van de leier, hè? Toch?
Van de leier en dat is gewoon live. Zo ziet mijn straat eruit. Hij is net verbouwd. Oh, daar ben ik weer. Ik zag daar net mijn irritante broertje. En mijn kleine broertje is in een slechte bui. Ik weet niet waarom.
En hij gaat ineens tuimen. Dat is een beetje...
En mijn broertje wil zo keer rijden. Hey, man, ik ga vloggen.
Imke, wat moet je doen vandaag?
Vandaag moet ik lezen, rekenen, spelling, taal en geschiedenis. Hier staat hoe lang. Dat duurde dus zo lang. En papier en digitaal. En ik heb het afgevinkt.
So after these first sensitized weeks with all the families, I really felt of that I kind of knew them, but I never saw them in real life. And this made it possible to research and understand the context of their everyday life from a distance using those small assignments. And therefore I was also able to define the lesson learned during the first moments of the COVID-19 pandemic. And another part of the study case I also want to share with you is a part of the concept exploration. So this whole process was a co-design process. But in the beginning of the concept exploration, I started an ideation session. And how do you organize an ideation session while taking into account all those restrictions during the pandemic, and also while not doing it online, because that was a thing I don't wanted to do. I wanted to have it physically. But one of the things was that meeting people outdoor was allowed. So a great opportunity was that I had a backyard that could be used. So therefore, adjacent backyards and a balcony were used to keep a safe distance between the households. And I organized an ideation session in my backyard. So here I was facilitating from my balcony, and in the different gardens, different households were participating. And I used bigger formats. Also, this group was no household, so they had to keep 1.5 meter distance. And in the end, they presented different ideas on a concept one-pager. So this was really kind of a thing that I just was looking for something, what is possible? Okay, so we can do this. This was a nice starting point for my ideation phase. And also to make the participants really co-designers of the whole process, I used low fidelity prototypes to develop a concept really together with the families. And I let them explore interactions and reflect on their experience with those prototypes. So I sent it all kind of packages and things to the households. And they gave me feedback, and kind of together we designed it. And after that whole process of prototyping, a final concept was developed.
Uit mijn graven, zoeken, denken, tekenen, testen, clusteren en nog meer praten, denken en graven en testen, viel alles op zijn plek. De geleerde les gaat over thuis, over samen zijn, die bubbel. Wat zelfs ervaren kan worden als vakantiegevoel. Het gaat over dicht bij het vuur zitten en elkaar leren kennen en elkaar blijven leren kennen. De momenten samen thuis bewust mee blijven maken en deze waardevol invullen. Mijn ontwerp, de Pinlight. Dit is een mogelijkheid deze les mee te nemen. Het is een middel om ons te helpen herinneren de tijd samen waardevol te blijven invullen.
Nice cut for my documentary. But here you also see all those prototypes and my final design. And for the paper, we used, through reflection on all the applied methods of involving users, we defined lessons for remote co-design in general. So because of time, I go really quickly through these learned lessons, and in the end, I showed the 3 principles we defined. So first of all, about the remote exploration, we learned that it's important to choose a wide focus group. We spread our request on social media, and also because it was really in the beginning of the lockdown, we had some groups to choose, and it was really nice because we didn't really define it beforehand. And beside this, we also used a very positive tone of communication and also the well-crafted materials. I made a flyer which really kind of attracted the people in this kind of negative environment of the start of the COVID-19 pandemic period. And in this flyer, I also shared some personal information already. So that was also very important from the start on, to have this balanced exchange of information. So I, as a designer, as a researcher, I shared already from the first moments something about myself, because I also was asking them to participate, to share over a distance information with me. So I was really open to the participants also about the whole process, and that was a very valuable aspect of the start of the process. About the remote generative assignments, this was the part of the context mapping phase. At the very start, I scheduled an online introductory meeting with every family. And also because there were children in there, we used online icebreaker assignments. And yeah, I really want to have this personal start. And an online meeting can be awkward, but this helped to make it more personal. And also the thing with the video interviews, it also gives you a little bit of the environment and the daily routines of the family, of the background. And that was something I really learned about this, that you have a distance, but you see things happening in the background, and I learned a lot of that. And also the self-directed videos, they unintentionally contained a lot of rich data. Also the children were filming, and they sometimes didn't know what they share and how valuable it was for me as a designer to see what was happening in their daily routines. But on the other side, you also need to be really aware of that, yeah, the directed and therefore selected editing of the videos you receive as a researcher. But also that gives a little bit of an insight about how they think and choose and what they maybe not share. And after the first week with the context mapping, I edited all the videos together and we watched it back together. And that was a really warm and personal moment, which was, again, the start is so important also when you don't see each other. And this was very personal, and that made it also that during the process, they kind of trusted me and I trusted them, which was very important. Then the ideation session, which I showed in my garden. I think one of the most important aspects about setting up an ideation session while taking all those restrictions into account is an opportunistic mindset for me, but also for the participants. And that brings me also to the aspect of that the strength lies in doing the unusual. And this comes from the phenomenon of hedonic adaptation. So many elements of this session were unusual, and that kind of created a positive energy during the session. So when I think about it, doing it maybe now a few times, then maybe it doesn't have the same effect, because at that moment it was just different, and that brought a positive energy during this session. And also everyone was in the same kind of thing. We didn't know what to expect at the start of the pandemic. So sharing those similar experiences created a really nice connection within the ideation session. And the last one about the remote exploring prototype, so that you, using those low fidelity prototypes creates really a feeling of ownership and understanding from the participants' perspective. So they were really co-designing with me. And also the children, they experienced an online meeting less intrusive. And that was a learning which I thought was very interesting. Children were much more timid during a physical interview at the end of the project, because then were able to do a few physical ones, compared to how they were doing the online interviews. So the online thing was something that for them created kind of a boundary where they were thinking, okay, we can do everything. And when I was really in their house, they were kind of, no, this is kind of scary. And the last one, also give the children the feeling of being a real designer as well, by giving them a central role in the process, because I experienced that they brought so much ideas and inspiration, and that's very valuable in a co-design process. So in the end, we concluded that it is possible to conduct remote co-design while meeting physically in real life is no option. But to effectively apply these remote approaches, we suggest 3 principles. First one is engaging users in the design process in the role of co-explorers. The second one, provide a sense of ownership of their project results. And the third one, establishing an opportunity-oriented mindset. So by creating a really positive tone of voice and appreciating everyone's effort and doing many small loops of constant exchange and feedback, that makes such a process very pleasant and engaging to work on, even if it's on a distance in a remote way. So, thank you.
Thank you, Wies, for the really, really lovely presentation. And one question from me, whether you can consider now that this new normality and there is no need to go back to the traditional co-design session, especially with children, as children experience this type of co-design less intrusive.
Sorry, that was the question, or?
The question was whether there is a need to go back to the normality, if there's a new normality, especially when we talk about co-design sessions with children, as they experienced it less intrusive.
Yeah. So I think that so that's the interesting thing, because now we are 2 years later, and actually still we are kind of in this situation. And I think sometimes we're kind of pushed to do these restrictions that we have to do it online. But on the other side, I saw that it has such a valuable impact on the children, that they felt comfortable, that I also suggest that we can learn from this. We had kind of this experiment, and that was the context of the lockdown. But for now, I see that maybe this way of having an interview with children, that we maybe better do it online, because also researching their context, they have arguments in the background. I had one interview that he was a child was standing on the table dancing, but I should expect that when I was really in their houses, they probably would never do that. Then you feel this kind of, oh, you're really there. But so I think that's kind of the positive aspect it has, and something we have learned from in this situation. Yeah.
Thank you. And Katarina also has a question. Please, Katarina.
Yeah, thank you so much for the nice presentation. I was wondering how do you think you could fit this method to people who are maybe not so digitally skilled, because all your participants seem to be very comfortable with the digital tools. So how do you think you could kind of adjust your method to people who are not so comfortable with the digital tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think for the interviewing, that's maybe quite hard. But I think, for example, for the prototyping, what I did was really sending them physical things so that they were really co-designing. And I think you can also do that maybe with the concept of their context exploration that was now really focused on filming. But I also had a booklet with all kinds of assignments. I think if people are not that comfortable with filming or something, you can do it in that way. But also a child of 4 years old was also filming as well, because I made really clear instructions of how to film, what to do. I gave them a selfie stick. So in that way, I think to make it that easy and that kind of playful, and not putting too much focus on really the technical part. So maybe, the most difficult thing was, filming, but with the phone. And I hope that most people know a little bit how to film, but it's a good question. But I think to make it, what I did in my project was really making it so easy that young children were able to do it. So maybe more the technical things are for really elderly people, quite difficult. But I think for the part, that's only for the part of the filming and the Zoom interviews, but for the prototyping, I really made it really physical and that they are reflecting on it in the booklets themselves.